In the center of the western Mediterranean Sea, not far off the coast of Italy, lies Sardinia. This rocky island place is a natural fortress, and yet Sardinia has never been populous enough to defend itself. And so for thousands of years, this strategic bit of land has fallen prey to the invader. Armies of ancient Greece and later the Romans all came to conquer and to plunder. And there's evidence of earlier invasions. These stone towers, called nurages, dot the island everywhere. No one knows their origin or purpose, for they were constructed before the beginning of history, even before the use of the arch. It's believed, however, that these were the battle towers from which one invader made war against another, while the Sardinians themselves remained aloof, choosing the protection of their granite hills. Here they still live today, unaffected by the modern ways of a modern world. It's true that one modern note was introduced in 1888. It's a sturdy little train, quite capable of serving the simple needs of the hill folk. And these are the people of our story. If it looks like the fireman is beating the engine to make it go faster, he is. For sometimes when the rails are wet, he must hammer on the engine sandbox to make the sand flow and provide better traction for the wheels. Although its speed is somewhat faster than that of a wild boar, the little train's schedule is quite often erratic. But all things considered, it performs very well. Safety first is the primary rule of the road, and the grade crossings are well guarded. But there's always some foolhardy, impatient character who just doesn't have a moment to spare. Through all the years, the Sardinians have remained independent and self-reliant, always managing somehow to make do with what their island offers. Much of this land is so rocky, it can be tilled only by scratching the thin topsoil with sticks, and so poor, it will produce only barley. So the reaping must be carried out as gently as picking flowers, to preserve each precious grain. And by dint of this careful doing, in the end, the farmers have a crop. This is another and more unusual mountain harvest, chestnuts. And in Sardinia, chestnuts aren't used just for stuffing turkey. They're carefully stored and serve as a vegetable throughout the lean winter months. These wild sheep are the original inhabitants of the mountains. They're called mufloni. Once they were plentiful, but hunters reduced their numbers drastically. And today they're found only in the most remote areas and are protected by law. In all probability, the mufloni were the ancestors of these flocks, which are so important to the Sardinians. In addition to wool, the sheep provide a basic item in the Sardinian diet. Each morning and evening they're gathered for milking. Later, the milk will be converted into cheese. The cheese is made on the spot, right in the field. This primitive process produces a rather primitive flavor because this cheese is literally handmade. Of course, wool is the most important product of the flocks, for later it will be woven into a strong waterproof cloth called orbachi. Now, on these hot summer days, shearing sheep could lead to sheer exhaustion, and so the men pause for a touch of tonic now and then. Although the sheep have lost their winter woolens, the memory seems to linger on. After the shearing, the wool is soaked first in warm water, then in the cool shallows of nearby streams. This is to remove some of the oil, but not all of it, for it's the oil that makes orbachi waterproof. After drying, the wool is carried down into the village where it will be spun into yarn for weaving. Even in everyday life, traditional dress is still worn in many villages. Here, with balls of homespun wool, the women folk are laying out the long threads of the warp before putting it on the loom. Of course, in every village, there's at least one small boy who has a talent for getting in the way. He means well, but he's not much of a help in this laying out process. Perhaps they should have laid out the small boy first. This sturdy, handmade loom on which the housewife weaves the orbachi is over 100 years old. The design has been in use for thousands of years, but it still does an excellent job. The cloth is by no means finished when it first comes from the loom. The material must be worked like this for many hours until it acquires a flexibility. The versatile orbachi is used not only in aprons and skirts for everyday wear, but a lighter variety forms an important part of the colorful costumes worn for gala events. The needlework is intricate, artistic, and exact. All the dyes used are homemade from roots and berries, and they never run or fade. This one burrow-powered mill, in which barley is being ground, is an exact duplicate of mills unearthed in the ruins of ancient Pompeii. The burro wears a blindfold to keep him from getting dizzy, but nothing has been provided to keep him from getting bored. In 12 years, he's traveled about 5,000 miles, or 16 times around the island, but he's never left home. Lunchtime, and a whole morning's work has produced about 5 pounds of flour. The blindfold is like an automatic starter. The moment it's put on, he's back in circulation again. Turning the barley flour into bread is a job for professionals. They They visit each home in the village and bake a week's supply at a time, taking their pay and a share of the bread itself. Patted into oversized wafers, the bread is called carta da musica, or music paper, because of its yellow and parchment-like appearance. This remarkable bread eliminates the age-old problem of dishwashing, for it's not only good to eat, but when split in half, it becomes the plate on which dinner is served. Not all the baking is plain. There's the fancy type, too, and this work is also done by professionals. Now, of course, these aren't part of the daily diet. There's going to be a wedding in the village. Almost anywhere in the world, where there's a wedding, there's music. These pipes are distantly related to Scotch bagpipes, but here one's cheeks must serve as the bangs. After the concert, friends of the groom serenade the bride. Freely translated, their musical compliments go something like this. It's wonderful to see you so lovely. To the heavens I address this prayer. May you both live in peace as peaceful angels. The groom, not to be outdone, has a few words to say too. And now each of the bridesmaids must have her turn. It was written that you should be together. Although destiny has allowed your eyes to meet but once, still it is enough. The wedding celebration always ends with dancing, but the dancing may not end for several days. Like all hard-working people, the Sardinians make the most of their holidays and festivals. On these occasions, the